for this and try to encourage more talking about personal finance. I feel like it's like a taboo topic that is to all of our detriment for not talking, whether it's investments or paying off college loans or any discussion before those major expenditures in life. So this is really meant to be, what do we want to talk about? And Sophia, for background, I also talk with Jack and Matt pretty frequently. We actually formed a little bit of a finance club. So we try to have on a recurring basis, a few times a year, these conversations around personal finance. But once again, fairly informal. If it's the four of us, figure we kick it off, share a little bit about our backgrounds. There's four pieces of advice, really keeping it simple in terms of what actionable steps can we do to better manage personal finance. We don't need to do the breakout session with our small group, but really, if there's Q&A, feel free to use the chat bar. This is meant to be your time and to be helpful. Can Jack or Matt kick it off? A little background on yourselves.
Sure. So my name's Jack Stein. I graduated from Carlson in 2013. So I know where you're at school-wise. I didn't have teachers nearly as cool as Matt. But after that, I got a degree in supply chain and worked predominantly in sourcing and supply chain roles. So I did corporate for about 10 years. I got an MBA during that time. And then now I started a company about a year ago. So my finances changed dramatically as it's self-funded. And we are courting customers, but don't have sales yet. So that is quite a different experience from what the two Matts have going on for finances.
But you're getting closer by the day.
I'm getting so close.
Yeah.
When we do this next year, I'll have updates.
I like it. All right, Matt.
Alrighty, yeah. Name's Matt Brown. I actually met Matt, Professor Ladoff, in Minneapolis back in 2012, 2013. And the reason I was in Minneapolis was I was working at Target in their corporate office. So I was there for a year and a half, 2 years. And then I moved out to Seattle for 8 years where I worked at Amazon. And the first half of my career at Amazon was kind of on the business side, working to essentially improve the customer's experience for all things Microsoft and video games. So if anyone who's watching this or is here as a gamer, and well, I was responsible for the Xboxes on Amazon. I'm a big gamer myself, so it was a bit of a dream job. And then the second half of my career and what I've been doing really for the past 5 to 7 years or whatnot, I always feel old when I have to think about this, but I work in the data engineering space. So help companies organize their data, write code and whatnot to organize that data at scale. So kind of billions of rows of data, doing a lot of the things you may all be familiar with in Excel, the lookups and all that, but doing it with code and with lots and lots of data. And let's see. For personal finances, I'm super interested in it. Agree, everyone should talk about it more because it is really important. And as you get older, it becomes even more important, especially when you have kids, of which I have 3 myself. So the budgets get tighter and you got to save for the kids' college. It's really important to have really good systems in place to manage your money. So that's me.
Cool. Thank you. Sophia, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm actually in one of your BA Impact Lab sections, which is where I heard about this. I'm a junior studying supply chain, and I just always been like fascinated with personal finance, but I didn't know where to go to like learn about it because it's like there's a lot of information out there and you don't know what information is right, it's just all a bit confusing. So I feel like I trust you guys more than someone on like Twitter or something. So
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I felt like all through my undergrad experience, it was always a topic that I had an interest in, but it probably wasn't until after undergrad, where I'm started trying to figure out one, paying off college loans, but with taking on a full-time role, what did that mean for my cost of living? How was I putting dollars away? Was I doing everything in, the most efficient, effective manner?
Mhm.
So, Matt, Jack, as you have things you want to add, once again, I have like a couple slides I'll go through, but this is really meant to like thematically talk about these topics. Sophia, as you have questions, feel free to write in the chat bar, or just ask the question. We'll go through these 4 steps. We've talked about a little bit of intros of ourselves. And so we want to talk about kind of what should we be thinking about when we talk about personal finances. And the first step is really understanding, do we owe dollars today? And that could be a college loan, a car loan, maybe I owe my parents money, or I have a bank loan, or any other type of debt. The first step is just understanding, who do I owe? How much do I owe them? And when do I owe them by? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about understanding our own personal cash flow. So like, what does that mean? Dollars coming in the door. If I'm, have a job where I have that reoccurring revenue coming in, even if I'm getting allowance from folks, or paying, for my cost of life. So rent, mortgage, car, food, any of those things, all that comes into consideration with cash flow. And then we'll talk about, ultimately, once we understand what's coming in the door, what's going out the door, what do I have to pay people, we can build our little bit of plan of action. And how do we actually set ourselves up for success and getting better over time? Anything else, Matt and Jack, we should mention before jumping into this?
Oh, works for me.
Cool. So I do try to have talked with a few students in the past, and it really is this little bit of 4-step process. Of the first step is just mapping out. And so this was actually someone I was going through this with, was just first mapping out, who did they owe money to, what were interest rates, if they've already have like a set payback period, what this all looks like. It doesn't need to be so formal on Excel. You can do this on a piece of paper, but the first step is really just understanding, who do we owe the money to and how much do we owe? So, Sophia, like for myself, when I graduated from undergrad, I had some FAFSA loans. And so that was something I needed to get a handle and ultimately make the decision. You could pay back over different time periods. You'll be given those type of options, and you can do that based on your earnings, or you can just do it over a set time period where you owe a set amount per month. Matt or Jack, did you have any college loans?
Yes,
Mine were
I did.
pretty-
Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, mine were pretty small, so I'm not an expert.
Yeah, I had about $20,000 of student loans after I graduated.
So main things, can take into consideration, if you're looking on whichever loan provider webpage, they should be pretty clear about what the interest rates are. That's really the biggest thing to take into consideration in terms of, you can see in this example, there's a credit card loan and that has 28%, APR, versus another one's 24 and 18. And so even though that Amex is the largest bill, it's really the first one you want to be tackling because it has the highest interest rate. So it's going to keep accruing interest at the, largest amount. Anything else, Matt or Jack, that you would mention
Yeah,
with
one
regards
thing
to
I'm
loans?
thinking when I'm looking at this is, if I was to do this for someone, I would add an additional column that says something along the lines of, is there tax benefit to this debt? So since we're talking to students, a lot of your student loans are going to have interest, but that interest can be deductible against your income to a certain point. So in that way, let's say you have a, I don't know, 10% low interest rate on your loan, but if you're getting a tax deduction from it, in reality, that interest rate's going to be lower than that 10% you're seeing. And credit cards are the worst. Education debt is good debt. Housing debt can be good debt if you're being somewhat responsible. And cars, it varies. You need one, or you might need one, but be reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to scare us too much talking about like all the different debt things, but often when we're starting the game of life, you know, independently, we are taking on some debt. And so obviously we want to keep that as low as possible. But acknowledging the situation that we're in and the situation that we might be in the next, you know, 3 to 5 years, whatever time horizon we want to look at. And so the goal then is understanding in the future, you know, hopefully, if we're taking on especially college loans, we're doing it because we have the opportunity to earn a higher income and pay those loans off. So we're going to talk about cash flow in terms of understanding what are we earning and how much is our cost of living. The first question I'm always curious is just understanding, do we know how much money we spent in the last month, or it could be in the last week? But the majority of us, especially I feel like when I was in college, if I talked to friends about it, just at a very high level, not even what did you spend your money on, but just understanding how much money did you spend in the last week, have little to no idea without just looking at the current status of their bank account. Any Jack or Matt, at what point did you start paying attention, or would you say you've always paid attention to how much you were spending?
Oh man, it's a good question. I would say I didn't start paying attention until maybe I was like 24, I want to say 25, maybe 25. And that's when I used Mint to just I think it's now gone, sadly. But I use Mint to just, you can basically have all your accounts synced into one spot. So all your credit cards, your bank accounts, your student loan provider, all of that, you can kind of sync it in there and you can see, it'll just tell you how much you're spending, and then, you know, also what your net worth is, which is just how much assets you have minus how many liabilities or debts you have. And then I would say once I had kids, this was probably 5 years ago, and my wife started staying at home, and so we went down to one income. So you know, reduced our income and then increased our fixed expenses with kids. That's when I actually started doing a zero-based budget, where every month I actually use an app called EveryDollar that allows you to develop a zero-based budget. And what a zero-based budget is just says, I'm going to write down every single thing I'm going to write down exactly where I'm going to spend my money. So, you know, let's just keep it simple. If you're going to make $100 in a month, like we're in April right now. I have an April budget, and I wrote down, before this month started, I wrote down exactly where I'm going to spend all my money. And that's including savings, including paying off debt. You know, don't have that right now outside the mortgage, but you know, there's kind of like tracking. I went from tracking to zero-based budgeting, and it really depends on how much work you want to put in, but that's been my journey.
Yeah. For me, I think I started understanding my personal cash flow when I started realizing that, okay, I have a little money left over at the end of the month. What am I going to do with it? And then I started thinking about retirement and then investing. And then it became more important to me to understand, okay, here's my investment goals. How much money, how can I maximize the amount of money that I have to put towards those goals? And that was probably at around 24, 25, like Matt.
Yeah. No, thank you both. And so when we're talking about it, it's really that understanding, mapping the inflow and outflow. So we talk about mapping our earnings, understanding if we're working a job while we're in school, or thinking about what life after school looks like. Whether it's, you know, maybe I have a primary full-time job. Oftentimes in my life, I've also had some secondary side hustle or supplemental income. And so just understanding like the ability to forecast out, if I'm working 10 hours a week and I get paid 20 bucks an hour, I can figure out that I'm making $200 a week before taxes. And so I can start to actually project what am I taking home in a given week, which is really important for both the forecast, what we're bringing in, but also what is my cost of living? Ideally, I can actually start to break apart and understand, are there portions of my cost of living that maybe I can't control or I can't change? I need to pay rent. I need to buy groceries. But maybe there's other things like going to the movies or going out to eat, that those are, you know, what we'd call more elastic expenditures that like I don't need to be doing those things. I want to be doing those things. But understanding at a really base level, what do I need and how much am I likely going to spend in each future month, so I can start to see what that difference is between what I'm bringing in and what I'm paying out. And ideally, I can actually start to see, oh, it looks like based on what I'm bringing in and spending, I'm actually saving $100 a month. And as Jack said, I can be putting that towards some future goals that I have. And maybe where we're going to get to is that means that I want to grow my earnings, or maybe there's ways that I can be cutting my expenditures. Anything else we want to add?
I mean, I would just echo the point that if I knew the information I had now, I would have started earlier. I'm dead serious when I think that I could probably have an additional $50,000 to $100,000 now, right now, and I'm 34. If I would have started at Sophia, your age, and anyone who's watching this who's in college, because that's the benefit of compounding interest is that if you start earlier, it's easier. And so compound interest, you may even cover this, Matt, but you know, let's say you put $100 in the bank right now, you can get about 4% in the bank. So then a year later, you're going to have $104. And now you're going to make 4% again off that $104. So instead of making $4, you're going to make, I don't know, $5. So you're going to have 105. And it's like a snowball, it just keeps compounding. And so, you know, just like a snowball, the earlier you roll it or the more hill you're rolling it down, the faster it is. And so, man, I look back and I think if I would have just budgeted and just, I don't know, just not eaten out as much, like that alone, several $100s a month, and I just would have cooked more, I could probably have, and you know, cooking is also just a good skill to have, but like, I want to hammer that home to Sophia, you, and anyone who's listening. The earlier you get started, the easier it is. So yeah.
I want to second that because I think that's like if I was to give one piece of advice this entire time, is starting early makes a big difference. And so I'm 33 and I've got friends who to this point have saved nothing for retirement. And they're at a point because of the power of compound interest where
Yep.
they every year they wait now, they're pushing retirement out 2 years or more. And they're getting to a point where it's like you've kind of made your bed and you have to lie in it. And you're only 30, 33, but
Yeah.
compound interest is so important that you're really limiting your options for what's going to be 40 years of your life.
And at some point, it's literally just too late. I mean,
Yep.
if you get in your 60s and you want to retire at 65 and you're at 60 and you have $10,000, I mean, you're pretty much solely relying on Social Security at that point, and you know, who knows what Social Security is going to look like when we're older. So it's really important to start early. Like, and like we all started early relative to our peers. Like I said, I started at 25. I got kind of lucky when I worked at Amazon. I was saving. I got paid in Amazon stock, and I was saving that. Not, yeah, I could have sold that and spent it, but I was just saving it outside of my 401k. And so, but if I didn't have that, you know, it would have been tough, especially now a position where I want to pay for my kids' college. Fortunately, I have that saved. But if I would have started at 21, or even, I mean, you could start at 16. There's no reason I'm going to tell my kids to open up a Roth IRA at age 4, whatever the earliest is. I don't know, 15. That's, I mean, if I would have started when I was 16 or something, it probably would have been another 150 grand or something. So,
And it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be big in the beginning either. I know the first year or first few years, I wasn't maxing out my retirement.
$100 a month. I mean,
Yeah, but it
yeah.
matters to build that habit, and then it's easier to just increase it every time you get a raise or a promotion or whatever. And that was one thing. This may not be the part for it, but I think it's important too, is lifestyle creep. The more money you earn, the more money people tend to spend. But if you can find out, like, live comfortably off of your first job, and then for the first 1 or 2 promotions you get, don't let your lifestyle expenses expand to the same degree your income expanded, and put that towards retirement, you're going to hit a point where you're maxing out your retirement, and in the future you can do whatever you want with extra money.
Yeah, no, and that to me is the biggest takeaway is your proactiveness of looking into this topic and considering these things. You know, you're another 5+ years ahead of Jack and Matt when they started, and they started far younger than many of their peers in their cohort, you know, that they're talking about. So I just want to go through kind of what we're talking about here in terms of like cash inflow, outflow. The first step is really just mapping, what am I spending money on? Ideally, we want to be categorizing that. You can very quickly see this. A lot of banks will break it down where you're spending money with, you know, infographics, or you can actually download into Excel file and start to understand these high level categories. Matt also previously talked about Mint, which is now Intuit. But there are a couple other apps that can support this as well. We'll talk more about resources after this. But first step, obviously mapping out, where are we spending money? Where are we earning money? And then that leads us into talking about, okay, now that I know where I'm spending and earning money, what is that difference? Do I have the ability to increase my earnings? Maybe I'm working 10 hours a week right now. Maybe I actually could be picking up an extra shift, or maybe I could actually be picking up overtime. All of this is a conversation of balancing our enjoyment of our current state. Like Mac talked about prior, you know, he could have been eating out less. Obviously, we don't want you to not enjoy your current state all to save for the future. You got to find what is your balance. But as Jack mentioned, with lifestyle creep, you want to be cognizant of what you are spending money on, especially if you find that there is that lifestyle creep. So talking about, you know, asking those questions around earnings, the same thing goes with spending. Are there opportunities to cut non-essential spending? Any Jack, Matt, things, observations as you were 24, 25, you talked about really becoming cognizant, and you mentioned maybe eating out, but other things that you started cutting or at least observing where you were spending that you didn't want to be?
I think this is a really important category, because once everyone starts getting their first full-time corporate job paychecks, people are making some long-lasting decisions on what they're spending their money on. And the things that I see is, and if it brings you a bunch of joy, it brings you a bunch of joy. But in my personal opinion, what a trap would be is basically an apartment in North Loop where you're spending $1,700 for a 1-bedroom a month. The people who have the nicest cars generally have the worst finances, so keep that in mind. And then the other one is weddings can be wildly expensive. You can spend as much money as you want on a wedding. If you've got the budget, there's someone who will host it for you. So finding the right amount of value you're getting for those items and experiences for balanced against cost.
So true. Matt, anything you'd want to add?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think everyone has different things they want to spend money on, but at the end of the day, if you want to eventually retire or, you know, start a business, like Jack has done, or, you know, pay for your kids' college or give your kids inheritance or any of those things that aren't spending right now, you have to save money. And so whatever you want to spend money on, that's fine. There's certainly things that are, for, cars, for example, they just immediately go down in value. You buy a $30,000 car, as soon as you take it off a lot, it's worth $20,000. So what does that mean? Well, if you want to go get a new car, let's say you want to go to get a different car for $30,000, you now have to pay an additional 10 grand, right? That was a $10,000 mistake, right? So I think the most important thing is to really make sure that you're saving money, period, right? And whether it's for your retirement or even before retirement, I'd save for an emergency. So I have 6 months. I have 6 months of cash in my bank right now. Whereas if I get fired, or there's there's a leak or something in my house, or there's some type of health issue, I have the cash and I don't have to go into debt to pay for that. And it gives you a lot of peace of mind when you save money. It really makes you breathe easy. When you start adding kids in your life and you start having, you get more responsibility at work, there's enough stress outside of finances. So having that peace of mind is good. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling, but my point is really everyone spends on different things. The most important thing is to save.
Absolutely agreed. So we walked through basically at a very high level, getting an understanding, what do I owe? What is my inflow and outflow in terms of being able to understand, am I living within my means? And am I actually able to put those extra dollars away, whether it's investment, savings, or paying down debt? The next thing to do is really holding ourselves accountable and saying, like any good goal, we're actually going to go back and review how we did against that goal. So whether we're looking at our finances on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, we want to actually have something that, for me, I literally block time on the calendar. Even if I'm not doing it in that moment, it reminds me that I said I was going to look at something, and I'll get it done by, later in the week or the next week. Any habits, Jack or Matt, in terms of how you're looking at your own finances, what your process, or maybe any tips you'd recommend?
I think Matt monitors this closer than I do.
Yeah, so I'm a little systematic with it, I guess. So every first of the month, me and my wife sit down and we put together our budget for the next month. We use the EveryDollar app to create that budget. And then every day we actually manually categorize every transaction. So if I bought Chipotle and I said, for example, we spend $300 a month on restaurants. When we buy Chipotle and it pops up in the app, I drag that into the restaurant line item budget, and it says, okay, now you have, let's say you spent $30 at Chipotle. Now it says, yeah, I have $270 at Chipotle. And so we make sure to not spend more than what we said we were going to spend. And the money's already being saved in our 401k and our Roth IRA. And so as long as we stay within budget, we're going to hit our goals. So that's the meeting we do on the first of the month. And then also on the first of the month, I review my, so I use a tool called Personal Capital to manage, to make sure to know how much I need to save every month in order to retire and pay for my kids' college. And in that they have there's a Vanguard has them. A lot of these places have retirement planner tools. So, but I'm looking at it right now, but Empower has a retirement planner tool that'll give you the percent chance of you hitting your retirement, essentially your percent chance of being able to retire and being able to hit your spending goals. And so I basically look at that once a month and I see, I'm looking at it right now, it says 85% chance. That's good. Doing a good job. And I'll send that to my wife and be like, hey, we're on track. So that's kind of the steps I take first of the month.
One thing I'm picking up on, and I know I mentioned it a bunch too, is we keep referring to retirement, and we're talking to people who haven't started their careers yet, so it may seem very foreign. And I'm not someone who ever wants to stop working. So when I talk about retirement, it isn't because I hate what I do or that I want to just be on a beach. Not that that wouldn't be cool, but for me, having that retirement cushion gives you options. So if you know that you're set and you're on track to be able to choose to stop working at some point, that's a level of empowerment that allows you to take risks or take time off for helping with family or whatever it is that you want. If you have pioneered your path towards retirement, it allows you flexibility throughout your life. You don't have to rely on a job. So that's I think an important reason for why we keep talking about that.
You also may not physically be able to work,
Yeah, that too.
right?
Life happens.
Right. And like, so got to prepare for that. Though obviously there's, there's government programs to help out with that too, but always good to have your own money.
So I was gonna say, we can definitely keep going. As you saw, we can talk about different resources for finances. I love Jack pioneering your path. I like the alliteration.
I made that up. I like it too.
Sophia, what questions? How can we be helpful?
I think like talking about different resources that are available to like track your expenses and kind of get all of that going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there. I'll give you what I personally use. I've talked about it before, but there's two main tools I use. One is an app called EveryDollar. There's also an app that's a competitor to it called You Need a Budget. And that allows you to do zero-based budgeting, where you say, before the month starts, here's exactly what I'm going to spend my money on, and that includes saving. And then you categorize transactions, and it tells you how much you have left to spend. So, before I go buy something, I say, well, do I have the money to be able to buy that? And then also one thing nice about it is that it allows you to have sinking funds. So once you, again, I know it was probably much later in life from where you guys are at now, maybe. Matt bought a house pretty early on, but when you buy a house, you have, you may have to, for example, I pay a company to take care of my lawn, like do weed treatments and what, but it's a once a year payment of like $1,000, right? Well, instead of being surprised by that once a year for $1,000 and be like, ooh, I don't have that, I actually save $100 every month, whatever it is, $85 every month. So when that bill comes, in the app you can kind of deduct and it'll build it up and then it'll deduct from it. So that's the app I use, and then I use an app called Personal Capital, or they got bought by Empower, so it actually might be Empower. But if you just Google Empower Personal Capital, that allows me to manage my net worth. So with a click of the button, I can see essentially how much money I have, right, across cash, investments, and then how much debt do I have, right, my mortgage, etc. And then it also allows you to do that retirement planning piece I talked about, where you can say, here's how much money I want to spend in retirement. Here's how much I want to pay for my kids' college. Here's how much I want to leave for inheritance or whatnot. And then it'll tell you, okay, here's how much money you need to save every month. And then it'll keep track, and tell you if you're on track or not.
So we talked at the beginning of this that, Instagram, Twitter, place online, I'm skittish, of maybe using those resources that are not trusted. Those also can be some tremendous resources, but I agree we need to be skeptic of what sources we're using and where have we gotten value. Matt, Jack, any recommendations for folks that you're following, or what individual sites that you've gotten value from?
For one that's kind of fun and breaks down really good topics into shorter pieces, it's called Money with Katie. And that's a podcast, really good, pretty famous. And then I love listening to Marketplace, which is an NPR podcast, comes out daily. It's 20 minutes, tells you what's going on in the business world, but they often cover personal finance things and what's going on in the market, which are going to affect your investments. And it's so digestible and fun to listen to.
Yeah, for me, I pretty much follow the Dave Ramsey baby steps to a T, except I have credit cards, I pay them off. So there's a few things I don't agree with him on, but I do think his methodology is very simple. He has basically 7 baby steps that he thinks you should do with your money. And then my second favorite is a podcast and YouTube channel called The Money Guy Show. I'd say The Money Guy Show is probably more for someone who's trying to squeeze every dollar. It's a little bit more technical, and Dave Ramsey's like well known for being really anti-debt. Like doesn't even say you should have credit cards. Whereas the Money Guy Show will say, hey, you should have credit cards as long as you pay them off every month, so you can get the points. So those are my 2 go-to. I'm just kind of obsessed with the whole space. I can name off. I read the Katie one. Graham Stephan's also interesting on YouTube. There's a good podcast I listened to recently where it's just going through like extremely wealthy people's finances, someone who's spending $200,000 a month. So
What
that
is
was even
that one? I'm
interesting.
curious.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah, I just listened to it at the gym like a couple days ago.
Well, you
I'll
find that
find it.
we're talking about credit cards. I'm not sponsored by Fidelity or Visa, but I will sing this from the mountaintop. Something I did when I was like, I think it was my first real credit card. I got the Fidelity Rewards card. And what it is it's 2% back on everything. And it goes into a Fidelity retirement account. And I did the math on it. And without compound interest, by the time I retire, if I just use that card, which it's my everything card, it will give me $35,000. So in today's dollars. So if you
Nice.
include compound interest, I mean, I'm getting paid like $70,000 just to buy what I already buy and not get like a Vitamix once every 3 years in points or whatever, you know?
Yeah, well, we use credit card points to pay for all of our Christmas gifts at the end of the year. So it definitely is free money, but I mean, credit cards are a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, you can make money off the points, but on the other hand, you can also go into debt with 25% interest. So if you're someone who can control yourself and have a budget, or you just make a lot of money, then they're probably good for you. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings on credit cards.
Sophia, what other questions do you have?
Can you talk a little bit more about like credit card points and like how that works?
Yeah. So there are different programs, and either Matt's correct me if you think anything I say is not correct, but generally they have some kind of scheme, so it won't be like you're getting a certain percent back on some credit cards. Like mine is 2% back and it's percentage based, so it's really easy to do the math. But for example, for my business, because I have to travel to conferences and stuff, I have a Hilton card. So with my Hilton card, it gives points. Points are generally worth a fixed amount. So for example, with a Hilton point, 1 Hilton point roughly equals 0.6 cents. You can look that stuff up online, but a point doesn't necessarily equal 1 cent or a certain percentage or whatever. Each one basically has their own game that they have you play.
Yeah.
It's good to know if your points expire. So on my Fidelity card, they don't expire. On my Hilton card, I think they do after a certain number of years, like it's a while, but it can be very valuable because over time, if you're spending what, I don't know, $30,000 a year, that's a fair amount of 2% of that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Yeah, I just use the cashback cards. So, Graham Stephan actually has a really good video on what credit cards you should use depending on the type of person you are on YouTube. But for me, I use the Citi double. You have to have a high credit score for this, but the Citi double cash, I think it's card. You get 2% back on everything. So that just means, I go spend $100. It's once you pay off your bill, once I pay off that $100, they'll then put $2 into essentially like a pot in my account that I can just click a button and send that money to my bank account. And so I use that. I use the Discover credit card because that's 5% cash back on rotating categories every quarter. So like I think right now it's gas, I think. So anytime I spend money on gas, I get 5% back. I use the Amazon credit card, Prime credit card, because you get 5% back on Amazon. And then I use the Amex credit card because you get 3% back on gas and groceries at all times. So I'm basically at all times saving anywhere from 2 to 5% on all my purchases just by using the correct cards. And then I just at the like December, like November 1st, we'll just go and deposit the money in our bank account and then use that to pay for Christmas gifts for our kids and our family members and whatnot.
And I think this is all worth noting as we talk about this topic, that there are a lot of opportunities to gamify and maximize what you're doing. But we think about the investment of time too, that it's important, like anything, to figure out what works best for us. But then to me, at some point, understand, it's going to be very marginal returns, whether I'm getting, cash back or I'm putting that in retirement. The main thing is we understand, what those major trade-offs are.
Yeah, you're not going to get rich with credit card points. Like you're going to get rich by putting money into your 401k and just saving money. Like,
yeah.
It's like if you get rich based off credit card points, that means you spent too much money.
Yeah, and with the time thing, it's like you're talking to people who nerd out over this stuff. So like I consider that a good use of time because I'm fully engaged. But if this bores you, yeah, it's probably not the thing for you to be focusing on.
I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Any final questions?
No, I think I'm all out of questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. The couple of things I'll end with, and then Matt, Jack, would be curious if you have any kind of parting wisdom. I always share this bonus advice is stuff that I wish I had told to me when I was in undergrad. Take advantage of company 401k matches. That's essentially extra dollars that are left on the table. And I'm always happy to talk about this again, Sophia, when you're graduating or as we're entering the workforce. But another thing that I did not take advantage of right when I graduated that I wish I knew a little more about was HSAs. So a lot of different employers that are offering healthcare benefits will have different types of benefits. HSAs are one type of such benefit where you can actually be putting dollars away pre-tax. You can be using them without getting taxed. You can even be investing without getting taxed. It's really a unique opportunity that I did not know about. So just, if nothing else, as you're looking at benefits in future life, consider HSAs or look further into those. The last thing I would say is trying to stay under 35% of our take-home pay in housing costs. Jack earlier talked about lifestyle creep, but one thing I've found that's really fascinating, friends that have done well for themselves and get better and better jobs over time are buying fancier and fancier places to live, but they're actually not keeping that number under 35%. And what you end up doing is you end up essentially spending all the money that you're making. And so you're not, putting anything away for the future, paying down debt, saving, investing. And so trying to keep that number as low as possible is really important. We talked about it earlier, but the adage of buying a house might be better than buying a car in the sense that you're buying historically an appreciating asset versus an asset that's losing money over time. That's a lot thrown your way. Any final advice, Matt or Jack, that you'd want to share?
One thing that we talk about in our finance group is money in your relationships and money with your partner. That can be, well, it is a really big deal if it's someone you're planning on marrying or being with permanently, because your finances are affected by someone else, and they may have different financial behaviors or what's normal to them. So talk about it. It's good. It's healthy. It'll help you understand what your partner's money values are.
That's a good one. Yeah, I just end on saying save money when you're young, right? It's much easier to save money in your whole life if you save money when you're younger. When you're 34 and my age, and you've been saving since, you know, a freshman could technically be watching this, right? Since you're 18. I mean, that's 16 years of saving, right? Obviously, you want to pay off your debt first, and I know college is expensive, so it's tough. But you know, pay off your debt and save as early as you can, because I think it was Einstein who said the power of compound interest is like the world's
Eighth
eighth
wonder of the
wonder.
world.
Yeah, and you know, that's a scientist, right? And not like some finance guy, right? And obviously he knows knows about the wonders of the world. So yeah, there's something to be said there. And you know, I personally really like the Dave Ramsey baby steps, and I like the Money Guys. They have a financial order of operations. They're do these things in order. It kind of makes it simple for you. So I would recommend to do those. Obviously, that's just my personal opinion. Lots of different ways to manage your money, but the earlier you get started, the bit easier it is. I mean, I'm happy I started when I was 24, 25, because like I said, we all know people who haven't started that, and it life gets more stressful, and then you don't want to feel like, oh my gosh, I have nothing and I'm 60, right? That is not a good place to be in. And you have the ability, especially if you get a good education from one of the greatest professors of all time, Professor Ladoff, you know, and you get a good job, you're gonna have that capability. So anyways, that's my parting note.
I love it. Thank you all. I appreciate everyone taking the time and attention to talk about personal finance. I feel like it's a topic that we don't talk about enough, and it really impacts a lot of aspects of our life. Last visual I'll leave us with is trying to really manage staying within our cost of living for 50% what we need to versus 30% wants and leisure and 20% towards savings and investments. I've seen a lot of different ratios of this, but another thing that, you know, as we go on, I think is worth paying attention to what we're spending money on, how much we're actually saving. Yeah, if any of us can be helpful in the future, certainly let us know.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Have a good
See you
evening,
later.
everyone. I was going to say, thank you all. Have a good evening. And I'm